there is a quiet suffering that almost nobody talks about. It lives inside the people who are trying the hardest. It follows the ones who want it the most. And it slowly destroys them not through failure, but through the very way they are chasing success. Most people never realize this. They spend years working towards something, and yet the harder they chase the outcome, the further away it feels. They wake up motivated and go to sleep exhausted and empty. They push and push and push, and somewhere deep inside they begin to wonder whether any of this is even worth it. And here is the truth: the problem was never their effort. The problem was never their talent. The problem was never even their discipline. The problem was what they were actually focused on while they worked. They were obsessed with the results. And that obsession, that constant hunger for the outcome, was quietly poisoning everything they were trying to build. The only way out, the only way to build something real, something lasting, something that doesn't break you in the process, is to fall completely, entirely, and unconditionally in love with the work itself. That is the whole lesson. Everything else is just a deeper understanding of what that truly means. Let me ask you something. Think back to a time when you started something new. A new goal. A new project. A new habit. A new chapter in your life. In the beginning, there was this aliveness to it. You felt energized. You felt connected to what you were doing. You weren't watching the clock. You weren't calculating how far you had to go. You were just in it. You were present. And in that presence, something in you felt right. Something felt purposeful. And then slowly, almost without noticing, something shifted. You started checking. You started measuring. You started comparing where you were to where you thought you should be. And the moment you did that, the moment you moved your gaze from the work to the outcome, the joy started draining out. The motivation became fragile. And the work, which once felt like life, started to feel like a burden. Have you ever noticed that? How the moment you need something to work, it stops feeling like something you love doing. There was a young man who had a gift for writing. Since he was a teenager, words came naturally to him. He would sit for hours and write, not because he had to, not because anyone was reading, but because something inside him demanded expression. The writing was enough. The act of putting words on paper filled something in him that nothing else could. He was obsessed with the work. And then, somewhere in his early 20s, he decided to share his writing with the world. He started a blog. He started posting. And something changed. Slowly, almost invisibly, he stopped writing for himself. He started writing for the numbers. For the views. For the comments. For the validation. And the more he chased those things, the less alive his writing became. He could feel it himself. Something hollow had crept into his sentences. The words were still technically correct. But the soul had left them. He kept going, but now it felt like pulling teeth. What used to take 2 hours of effortless joy now took 2 days of agonizing struggle. And he couldn't understand why. He told himself he needed to work harder. He told himself he needed to be more consistent. He told himself he needed a better strategy. But the truth was simpler and deeper than any of that. He had traded the love of the craft for the hunger of the reward. And you cannot write from that place. You cannot build from that place. You cannot create anything real from that place. The work had not changed. But he had changed his relationship to the work. This is one of the most important things I want you to understand. The quality of what you produce is inseparable from the state you are in while producing it. When you work from love, from curiosity, from a genuine desire to grow inside the craft itself, something comes through the work that simply cannot be manufactured any other way. You can feel it in music. You can feel it in writing. You can feel it in the way someone builds a business or raises a child or repairs an engine. There is a difference between work done with presence and work done in desperation. And the world can tell the difference, even when the person creating it cannot. You see, when you are obsessed with results, you are never actually where you are. You are always somewhere in the future. You are always measuring the present against a fantasy. And because the present can never be the fantasy, the present always feels insufficient. Always feels like not enough. Always feels like a disappointment waiting to happen. This is a form of suffering that is entirely self-created. And it has nothing to do with how hard you are working. It has everything to do with where your attention lives while you work. Think about this for a moment. Two people are doing the same work. They are side by side. They are putting in the same hours. But one of them is working with their full attention on the task in front of them. Every detail matters to them. Every small improvement excites them. Every difficulty is interesting to them rather than threatening. The other person is constantly looking at the finish line. They are calculating. They are comparing. They are asking themselves if this is working, if they are far enough along, if this is all even worth it. After 1 year, which person do you think has grown more inside the work? Which person do you think has developed a deeper skill? Which person do you think has built something they actually want to keep building? The answer is obvious when someone else is the subject. The hardest part is seeing it when you are the person in that story. There is a concept in psychology that some researchers call the paradox of the goal-focused mind. When you attach your entire emotional well-being to a future outcome, your brain begins to perceive the present moment as a problem, as a gap, as a failure in progress. The distance between where you are and where you want to be becomes a source of anxiety rather than a source of direction. And anxiety is one of the most powerful creativity killers in human psychology. It narrows your thinking. It pulls you out of flow. It makes you second-guess decisions that your instincts would have handled effortlessly. And ironically, it makes the very outcome you want less likely to arrive. Not because the universe is cruel, but because your best work never comes from a state of anxiety. It comes from a state of absorption. From being so deeply inside what you are doing that the outcome stops being a thought at all. Ask yourself this honestly. When was the last time you did something so completely, so fully, that you forgot to check whether it was working? I think about a woman I once heard about who had been trying to lose weight for over a decade. She had tried every program, every diet, every system. She would start strong and then fall apart. She would lose 10 pounds and celebrate and then slowly, without realizing it, start eating the same way she always had. For years she blamed herself. She told herself she lacked willpower. She told herself she was weak. She told herself she simply was not the kind of person who could maintain discipline. And then one day, almost by accident, she started cooking. Not to lose weight. Not as part of a plan. A friend invited her to a small cooking class and she went out of curiosity. And something woke up in her. She became interested in food in a way she had never been before. She started exploring flavors. She started reading about nutrition not as a weight loss tool but as a kind of science she found genuinely fascinating. She started cooking for her family and feeling proud of what she put on the table. And over the next 2 years, her body changed. Not because she had finally found the right program, but because she had stopped punishing herself with a goal and started finding something to love inside the process. She was not obsessed with losing weight anymore. She was obsessed with cooking well. And the weight, the outcome she had chased for a decade, arrived quietly as a side effect of that obsession. This is not a coincidence. This is not a feel-good story. This is how transformation actually works for human beings. Now understand this. I am not telling you to stop caring about your goals. I am not telling you that outcomes do not matter. They do matter. Goals matter. Direction matters. Having a vision for your life matters deeply. But there is a profound difference between knowing where you are going and being consumed by whether you have arrived. One gives you direction. The other robs you of presence. And without presence, you cannot do the work that actually leads anywhere worth going. There is a story about a young basketball player, a teenager who had real talent but was burning out by 17. His coach noticed that the boy had stopped enjoying practice. He would go through the motions. He would perform well enough when he needed to, but there was no fire in it. No joy. The coach sat with him one afternoon and asked him simply, "When you first started playing, what did you love about it?" And the boy thought about it for a long time and said he loved the feeling of a perfect shot. Not the score. Not the win. Just that feeling of the ball leaving his hand at exactly the right moment. The coach told him, "Then go back to that. For the next month, I don't want you thinking about winning anything. I want you to fall back in love with the shot itself." It sounds too simple. But the boy did it. And within weeks, something returned to him. A focus. A sharpness. A pleasure in drilling the same move 100 times, not because it would get him somewhere but because the refinement itself was satisfying. And that season was the best he had ever had. Not because he stopped wanting to win, but because he stopped letting the want to win contaminate the love of the game. The results followed the love. They always do. Let me ask you something harder now. What are you actually afraid of when you check the results so often? What are you looking for when you measure and compare and track? I think for most people, if they are honest, it is not really information they are seeking. It is reassurance. They are looking for proof that what they are doing is not a waste. That they are not fooling themselves. That they are not behind. That they are enough. And here is the painful truth about looking for that kind of reassurance in outcomes. Outcomes are slow. Outcomes are uncertain. Outcomes are often invisible for long stretches of time. And if your sense of whether you are enough depends on evidence that takes months or years to appear, you will spend most of your journey feeling not enough. Which means you will spend most of your journey in a state that makes the journey unbearable. And many people quit not because the work was too hard, but because the emotional weight of constantly measuring themselves against an unreachable horizon became too heavy to carry. The obsession with results is, at its core, an identity problem. It is a belief, often unconscious, that your worth is located somewhere in the future. That you will be enough when you achieve the thing. That you will deserve respect when the goal is reached. That you can finally relax and feel proud of yourself once the result confirms what you have been hoping about yourself. And so every day that the result does not arrive is another day of quiet self-rejection. Another day of feeling that you are not there yet. Another day of being in a hurry to arrive somewhere that keeps receding as you walk toward it. There is no peace in that way of living. None. Think about the craftsman of an older time. The carpenter who spent years learning to shape wood. The glassblower who spent a lifetime learning to read the heat. The farmer who learned to listen to the land. These people did not have performance dashboards. They did not have metrics tracking their daily output. They had only the work itself and the slow accumulation of skill and knowledge and wisdom that came from giving their full attention to it. And in that giving, in that complete absorption in the doing, they became someone. Not just someone skilled. Someone whole. Someone who carried a kind of quiet dignity that had nothing to prove because it had been built from the inside out. We have lost something important in our age of constant measurement and instant feedback. We have forgotten that the deepest growth happens below the surface, in ways that cannot be tracked or quantified, in the invisible shifts of character and understanding and capacity that accumulate through sustained, loving attention to the work itself. You cannot see that growth on a spreadsheet. But you can feel it in a person. You can see it in how they carry themselves. You can feel it in the quality of what they produce. And most importantly, you can sense it in whether they seem to be at peace with what they are doing. Ask yourself this. Is there peace in what you are doing right now? Or is there a constant low-grade anxiety underneath everything, a persistent feeling that you are not moving fast enough, not achieving enough, not getting the recognition you deserve? I am not judging that. I have felt it myself. Most people who are genuinely trying feel it. But I want you to see it clearly. Because that feeling is not motivation. It is not drive. It is not what is going to carry you through the years of work that real achievement requires. Real drive, the kind that lasts a decade, 2 decades, a lifetime, comes from something much quieter and much more powerful than anxiety. It comes from genuine interest. From real curiosity. From the part of you that finds the work itself fascinating and meaningful and worthy of your full attention. There was a man in his late 30s who had built a small business from nothing. He had worked incredibly hard for years. He had made sacrifices. He had delayed everything. He had told himself that once the business reached a certain size, once the revenue hit a certain number, once the recognition arrived, he would finally feel what he had been working toward. He was chasing a feeling. And then one year, the business hit all of his targets. Every number he had been chasing arrived. And he sat in his office the morning after reading the final report for the year and felt almost nothing. A small flash of satisfaction. And then an emptiness he had not expected. He could not understand it. He had arrived. He had gotten the result. So where was the feeling? He called his father that evening, a man who had spent his entire career as a mechanic and who had spent 40 years doing work that most of the world would consider modest. And the son explained what he was feeling. And the father was quiet for a moment. And then he said something simple. He said, "I have never worked for the feeling at the end. I work because I love finding out what's wrong and making it right. Every car is a puzzle. Every day is a new problem. If I had spent 40 years waiting for the feeling at the end, I would have been miserable for 40 years. You don't find it at the end. You find it inside the work. Or you never find it at all." The son hung up the phone and sat in the quiet of his office. And for the first time in years, he asked himself a question he had never honestly asked before: do I actually love what I do? Not the success of it. Not the identity of being a successful person. Do I love the actual work? That question changed the next decade of his life. I want to pause here and say something that I think is deeply important. The shift from being obsessed with results to being obsessed with the work is not a passive shift. It is not about lowering your ambition or becoming comfortable with mediocrity. It is the opposite. When you fall in love with the work, your standards rise. Not because you are trying to impress anyone, but because the work itself matters to you. You begin to care about details that no one else would notice. You begin to push yourself not because you have to, but because the quality of the craft demands it of you. The best people in any field are not the ones who wanted the most desperately to be the best. They are the ones who loved the doing of the thing with such depth and consistency that being extraordinary became a natural consequence. This is the paradox that most people spend years trying to understand from the outside. The way to achieve more is to care less about achieving and more about the quality of your daily presence inside the work. The way to build something extraordinary is to stop thinking about how extraordinary it will be and to think instead about how extraordinary you can make this one piece, this 1 hour, this one act of honest effort right now. Most people never realize this because they are waiting for the result to tell them whether they are on the right path. But you cannot wait for the result. The result is a reflection of what you have already been doing for months or years. By the time the result arrives, the decision that led to it has long since been made. The only decision point you actually have is right now, in this moment, in this hour of work. And the question is not whether this moment will lead to the result you want. The question is whether you are fully here for it. Whether you are giving it your genuine attention. Whether you are respecting it enough to be present for it. There is a student who studied music for 6 years with serious dedication. She practiced every day. She pushed herself hard. She auditioned for programs, applied for opportunities, worked constantly toward the career she had imagined. And she did not get there. Not in the timeline she had expected. Not in the form she had expected. And for a period of about a year, she nearly stopped playing altogether. Not because she was lazy. Not because she gave up in any dramatic sense. But because the gap between what she had worked for and what had arrived was so painful that the music itself had become associated with disappointment. She could not sit at her instrument without thinking about everything that had not happened. And then one evening, during what was supposed to be a regular practice session, something shifted. She stopped thinking about the career. She stopped thinking about what it all meant. She started playing a piece she had loved when she was 12 years old, before any of this had become a pursuit, before any of this had become a project with a destination. And she played it for almost an hour. Not perfectly. Not professionally. Just fully. She was inside the music in a way she had not been in years. And she wept. Not from sadness. From recognition. She had missed the music. Not the career the music was supposed to create. The music itself. She had been so busy trying to use the music to become something that she had forgotten what the music felt like when it was just itself. That night she made a quiet decision. She decided that whatever happened with her career, she would never again let the music become a transaction. The music was not a means to an end. The music was the end. Everything else was extra. Within 2 years, doors opened that had previously been closed. But more importantly, she was happy in a way that the career she had originally wanted might not have provided, because she had rebuilt her relationship with the work from the ground up. Now I want to say something about discipline. Because I think this lesson is sometimes misunderstood as being about passion alone. As if I am saying that if you love your work enough, discipline takes care of itself. That is not quite right. Discipline is absolutely necessary. But discipline built on top of love for the work is a completely different experience from discipline built on top of fear of failure or hunger for validation. Discipline from love is sustainable. It is patient. It can survive setbacks without becoming bitterness. It can sustain long periods of invisible progress without breaking down. Discipline from anxiety is brittle. It burns bright and then collapses. It turns every setback into a crisis. It makes rest feel like sin and effort feel like punishment. If your discipline is built on anxiety about results, you will eventually exhaust it. Because no human being can sustain that kind of inner pressure indefinitely. But if your discipline is built on genuine care for the quality of what you do, it becomes something closer to a value than a strategy. And values do not need daily renewal the way motivation does. Here is a question worth sitting with for a while. What would your work look like if no one ever saw the results? If there were no measurements, no feedback, no external validation of any kind, just you and the work? Would you still care about doing it well? Would you still push yourself toward the best version of it that you could produce? If the answer is yes, you have found something real. If the answer makes you uncomfortable, that discomfort is telling you something important about where your motivation is currently coming from. The people who build things that last are almost always people who would have done the work regardless of whether it was seen. They had an internal standard that existed before the external recognition arrived. And that internal standard, that personal insistence on doing the work with care and integrity and full attention, is what made the recognition, when it came, feel earned rather than lucky. This is the identity shift I want you to consider. Right now, there may be a version of you that defines yourself through your results. Your worth is tied to your productivity. Your sense of self expands when things go well and contracts when they do not. You are in a constant relationship with your outcomes, reading them like a mirror, looking for confirmation of your value. And that version of you is exhausted. That version of you cannot rest. Cannot trust the process. Cannot be patient. Because that version of you does not have a self that exists independently of what it achieves. But there is another version of you. A version that is defined not by outcomes but by the quality of attention you bring to what you do. A version that is recognized not by trophies but by craft. A version that does not need the result to arrive in order to feel like someone worth being. That version does not need to be waited for. That version is not somewhere in the future. That version is available to you the moment you decide that how you show up to the work is more important than what the work eventually produces. And here is the beautiful truth about that version of you. When you show up to work with that kind of integrity, with that kind of love, with that kind of absorbed and patient and curious attention, the results do come. Not always on your timeline. Not always in the form you expected. But they come. Because the world, over enough time, rewards genuine quality. It rewards depth of skill. It rewards the kind of work that only emerges from someone who was not trying to impress anyone, but was simply doing their absolute best because their best mattered to them. The results are real. The desire for them is not wrong. But the results are downstream of the work. They are a consequence of the quality you put into the process over time. You cannot shortcut to them by focusing on them more intensely. The only access point to the results you want is the quality of your presence inside the hours of work that make them possible. And quality of presence requires that you stop treating those hours as a means to the end and start treating them as the thing itself. This is not philosophy for its own sake. This is the most practical truth about how long-term achievement actually works. The people who make it not just in one burst of effort but over years, over decades, are the people who found a way to fall in love with the journey itself. Not every moment of it. Not effortlessly or without struggle. But at a fundamental level, they chose the work. Not the reward that might come from the work. The work itself. And I know that some part of you is waiting for me to tell you how to do this. How to fall in love with the process when the process is difficult. How to stay present in the work when the results feel far away. And the honest answer is that it is not a technique. It is a decision. A quiet, daily, personal decision to be fully here for what you are doing right now. To treat this hour of work as though it matters on its own terms. To stop auditing your progress every 5 minutes and simply do the thing with as much care and curiosity and presence as you can bring to it. Some days that will feel easy. Some days it will feel almost impossible. On the hard days, ask yourself this. Even if nothing ever came from this work, even if no one ever noticed, even if the outcome I am hoping for never arrives, am I willing to do this well anyway? Am I willing to be the person who gave it their honest best regardless of what the world returned? That question, answered honestly, will tell you more about where you are and who you are capable of becoming than any metric ever could. There is a version of you that keeps waiting for the result to feel ready. Keeps looking for proof that the effort is paying off. Keeps seeking permission from external evidence to believe that the work is worth continuing. That version of you will spend years in a quiet and invisible exhaustion, always one result away from peace, always one achievement away from finally feeling like enough. And there is another version of you. A version that has decided, quietly and irrevocably, that the work is worth doing because the work is worth doing. A version that has stopped outsourcing its motivation to outcomes. A version that has found something in the doing itself that makes the doing its own reward. That version is not naive. That version still wants the results. That version still has ambitions and goals and a vision for where all of this is going. But that version is free in a way that the outcome chaser will never be. Free to be fully present. Free to take risks. Free to fail without collapsing. Free to rest without guilt. Free to keep going when the evidence says stop. Because that version does not need the evidence. That version is fed by the work itself. The results will come when they come. And they will come. Not because the universe rewards patience as a virtue, but because sustained presence inside honest work produces skill, and skill produces quality, and quality produces recognition, over enough time. You cannot rush that sequence by caring more about the outcome. You can only honor it by caring more about the process. The work is the life. Not the preparation for the life. Not the price you pay to eventually get to the life. The work, done with presence, done with love, done with genuine and patient care for the quality of it, that is the life. That is what it feels like to be fully alive inside something. And that feeling, that sense of absorption and purpose and genuine effort freely given, that is the only thing that cannot be taken from you. Results can be taken. Recognition can be withdrawn. Circumstances can change. But the experience of doing your work fully and freely and with your whole self is yours, regardless of what the world does or does not return. Stop chasing the result. Start honoring the work. Fall in love with the process not because it is the trick that eventually produces results, but because a life spent chasing outcomes you haven't reached yet is a life spent not being here. And you are here, right now, with this work in front of you. It is asking for your full attention. It is asking for your best effort. Not because of where it might take you. Because of who you become when you give it everything you have. The choice has always been yours. The work has always been waiting. Be here for it.